Yes, VFX world. Welcome to episode 5 of the VFX Script Podcast with Motors VFX. And just on that, thank you to everyone who has watched, listened, subscribed so far. I appreciate it more than you know. We're back out in LA for this one with someone that I've been dying to get on for a little while. We met a few weeks ago, had a great conversation, and we just had to get him on the pod. He is someone that has been in LA for the majority of his VFX career, if not all of it, working at places like ILM, COSA, Fuse. Is also now consulting for businesses worldwide in the VFX industry and is the founder of the VFX Atlas. Joseph Bell, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks, Kurt.
Mate, as ever, appreciate you being on the pod. It's great to have another person on. 5 episodes. Didn't think I'd be doing that. So, yeah, I'm buzzing to have you as number 5. And actually, wicked to see you at the VES last month. How was that for you?
That was a great night. There was a lot of positive energy in the room. You know, great work up on the screen as always. It's nice to celebrate it.
100%. And thanks for the beer as well, by the way.
Oh.
I definitely owe you.
My pleasure.
I agree. Really good evening. Felt a lot different to last year in a positive way. I feel like last year, kind of, everyone was putting on a brave face, just in the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
This time, look, things are still quiet. However, a lot more optimism. It felt. So yeah, I was happy with that. I mean, as ever with every guest, we have specific talking points, but give me a little bit of a rundown of your career.
I always wanted to do this. I'm one of those people, growing up in the UK, growing up on Ridley Scott movies and, James Cameron movies, seeing ILM's early work early on for me, it was that's what I want to go do. So I had my sights set on it. I was doing experimental stuff with, early digital video platforms when I was in high school back in the UK. And eventually got into documentary filmmaking, and that was really my ticket out here to Los Angeles. I had made a few student documentaries, and that got a little bit of notice, and that got me into the University of Southern California Film School, which is one of the big sort of schools feeding into Hollywood over here in LA. So that first got me out here. Started interning while I was still in school. Internships got a little bit out of hand. I was producing while I was still in school. And, I'd have clients say, "Oh, you're not going to be in the office on Wednesday afternoon, are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to say that, I got to go to school on Wednesday afternoon." So I just, gloss over that a little bit. But yeah, no, I was into it before I graduated, and I was lucky to get pretty smoothly onboarded into my first few jobs in the industry.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah, two Brits doing a podcast in LA.
There you go.
Pretty fun. I mean, yeah, listening to that, obviously filmmaking, this is something you wanted to be involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Was it LA from the get-go? I mean, what happened there?
I think the types of films that I most wanted to be involved with, and I should say TV shows as well, it wasn't just feature films, were clearly coming out of LA. They were written here. They were being backed by studios here. So I wasn't as aware of the scene that was growing in London at that time, and certainly that was a very active scene, a lot of groundbreaking work being done there. But in terms of being involved in these sort of blockbuster-sized movies with sci-fi and fantasy settings, which I was really into, LA seemed like the place to be.
Makes sense. I mean, I romanticize about LA all the time, and people know that I love this place and really enjoy coming back. So I think I can relate to that in some way. But you've worked at some good places, some very good places, and had an awesome career so far. Was there a set plan? Did everything happen as you imagined? Was it organic? Did you end up pivoting? Where you are today, did you envision that?
I think my career in visual effects got off to a good start because someone at one of those early internships gave me some good advice. I
Okay.
was actually interning in development at a production company, and they said, "Okay, you seem like you've got it together. What do you want to go do?" So visual effects. I said, "Okay, well, we can send you. We got connections at a big visual effects studio here in LA, and we could get you in the door there. But you will be one of 40." Entry level folks making the coffee, watching it go around, trying to get noticed. If we set you up at a smaller studio, maybe one that you haven't heard of, then you'll probably get a bit more to do there and be a bit more involved more quickly. What do you want to do? So I said, well, sign me up for the smaller studio. So they set me up with Pixel Magic, which is still around today.
Awesome.
Raymond McIntyre's operation. Ray Scalise there as the manager, and they got me off to a good start. I mean, the contact I had with clients there really set the tone for all of the work I've done. Following that, so very grateful for that experience. Those guys gave me really my first break in the industry.
Fantastic. You spent some time at the mill in your career. Obviously, this is going to be aired, just after the news that we've heard. I mean, thought process on that. Have you spoken to many people? How are they doing? It's a huge loss.
It's a big shock to the industry, and that's true whether or not you could say you saw it coming. I mean, Technicolor, we know, has had some financial struggles for a long time now. That's not new. It's a well-known fact. And, maybe we didn't realize that it was going to happen as abruptly as it did. But I think in hindsight, there's drivers for that, reasons for that make sense. In terms of how it's playing out for the folks who are affected by that, I mean, obviously, I know a fair few folks. I'm very sorry they're having to go through what they're going through right now. I know we all are. I've been briefly in touch with some of the Mill US people who very quickly pivoted and formed a new studio, Art Creative. They've got backing from Dream Machine Effects. I imagine that happened pretty quickly, and maybe they didn't have all the breathing room they wanted to reach out to everyone on day one that they wanted to get in contact with.
Sure.
But, I'm glad that they're up and running and they've got something to go on to. As far as the other mill studios, including India, that remains to be seen. But one of the tragedies here is the mill is such a well-known brand, such a well-respected company. 30 plus years. I forget the exact longevity of it, but it's been a titan in the industry and really shaped many people's careers. So it's a sad day to see that shutting down.
100%. And I'm hoping things pick up so that because it's not you've just added to the pool of available talent. Realistically, certainly feels like there's some kind of great reset happening in visual effects right now.
Sure.
Obviously, Technicolor, huge name. They're not the first that's gone down in this period. We can't talk about other names just yet, but I definitely don't think they're going to be the last. It's an interesting time for, the industry. Is there going to be a new mindset? Can the big vendors pivot? Pivot to what? I don't really have the answer to that yet. But I would say I'd say the industry is going to look different in the next 6 to 12 months. Possibly from an operation standpoint. I don't think that there's going to be no artists left, nothing like that. They'll be back in work, but operations I think will look very different, which is good for your data sets on the VFX Atlas.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think it's important to diagnose a little bit what's happened with Technicolor. I'm not an insider in the company. I don't have any sort of special knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes there. But just looking at the sort of public conversation that's happening in places like LinkedIn and seeing all the different theories people have for what went down, I think it's important to just sort of get a few facts out there so we don't jump to the wrong conclusion. So as far as I can tell, there's prior to this event was Technicolor, there were 5 visual effects studios with well over 1,000 employees. And now with MPC apparently closing down, we're down to 4. As far as I can tell, those other 4 studios haven't seen a significant reduction in headcount over the past couple of years. So whatever the nature of the work is that they're doing and the shows they're doing, maybe the work's happening in different places, but just in terms of the sheer number of people they seem to need to get the work done, hasn't changed all that much.
Interesting.
So we can sort of shed this idea that's floating around out there that AI, which is a tremendously exciting set of technologies, has sort of already come in and swept away our need for artists and large crews to get this stuff done. What's happened with MPC and Technicolor hasn't happened with the other four big studios, and that's telling, right?
That's a really interesting point. I think gives a bit of positivity around things, and again, the reason for this pod is to try and get those things across. You talking about that, someone might not know that's a thing. Those statistics, which is massively important, and leads on nicely into the VFX Atlas and what you're doing, because you're putting out some pretty important key data sets, and giving people a lot of food for thought around various topics and subject matters within the industry. What was the thought process in deciding to do the VFX Atlas? Where did it come about from? And what is it?
What is it? Okay. I really felt that we needed to talk more about visual effects as an industry. I mean, visual effects has evolved tremendously as a business since I've been in it for 20 odd years now. Yeah. So some of the mindsets that were around when I got started came from a smaller industry. It wasn't as global. There wasn't as much work, and there weren't sort of structures built around the industry the way they are today. So I think there's a fair number of our colleagues across the industry who don't necessarily talk to clients every day, who don't necessarily sit in meetings about running the business, don't know how the finances work, and maybe they don't want to. That's fine too. But as a result of that, not everyone, I think, has the same sort of visibility into how visual effects works as a global industry, and that can have a profound effect on the company you work at. It can have a profound effect on you and your career, as many of us, already know. But I feel it's important for us to sort of talk about that and to develop hopefully a shared understanding of what's going on around us and the industry that we're all in.
I think it's paramount. And like I said, there might be people that look at it and sort of ignore it. There's going to be people that are going to look at that and actually think, I can really utilize this information and, make VFX a better place. I think it's certainly lacking in some areas around ethics and whatnot. So people can utilize that. Also, some of the data that you're putting out can be utilized in sort of just business efficiencies as well.
Yeah.
I'm sort of in a fortunate position in some ways where I'm kind of an outsider looking in. So don't really have any ties to things. It does sort of blow my mind sometimes, some of the thought processes that I see, and minor tweaks could create, huge efficiencies.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you see.
I think the industry is still quite compartmentalized today. And I really feel like, maybe it's too much of a statement, but to use a metaphor, we've been flying blind for a long time. We kind of know that there's a lot of VFX artists in India. We know that. And we know that, Vancouver and Canada has seen a boom, and London's it. But do we know how many? Do we know which companies are there? Do we know how that's changing over time? And I think, it's going to take a while for this data to really be used to its full extent, because we're used to not having it. We're used to making decisions without the benefit of this kind of data. So looking at other industries, which is something I do a lot these days, and seeing how they're using data-driven decision-making to improve efficiency and plan their business strategy, I think is going to be informative for us in the next few years.
Where would you see things in terms of using that data? How do you see it being a benefit in terms of day-to-day operations? I mean, example, I'd love to, I think everyone would actually love this, getting a data set on how many, we can't obviously disclose the companies, but how many companies, are underbidding. How much work is being underbid out there for one, and how can we use that potential data to turn that around? The thought process behind the underbidding as well. I'd say that would sort of be quite interesting reading.
For sure.
I'd love to know how many people actually sort of bid on the line versus, trying to just get the work in. And look, there's people that do it because they need the work, and I understand that as well. But to grow and develop this industry, individuals paid fairly, business owners making more profit as well. Absolutely should. Instead of the gap getting bigger from the top to the middle and bottom, can that data actually help them sort of swing it back potentially?
There's certainly ways to get at that, and I think it's important to have a sort of benchmark. Like I say, we're looking for a shared understanding of what the industry looks like. If you look at airlines, very different type of business, different type of company. There's an understanding of what the profit margins of an airline are and how that industry works. And I think we have that too in visual effects. It's just not quite as well known. So as we're looking at the industry we have today, and we're thinking about how it's changing, and maybe what we can do to reshape it for the future, I think knowing the parameters in which we're working is very important. I think in terms of what we can realistically achieve in terms of reshaping the industry, in terms of making things better for people and having stronger companies, it's important to know what the boundaries are. I say boundaries not to try and limit us, but to say, we're working in a system, and the leverage we have to improve things comes from knowing which levers to pull. I think one thing that really stands out to me about visual effects, which is sort of an unusual feature of the industry, is that we have a small number of very large dominant clients in the industry. So speaking of 2025, I just read a statistic that worldwide, everyone together is going to spend, I think it's $248 billion on making content. Big number. Hard to imagine that number. 8 companies, LA-centric companies, account for more than half of that spend.
Wow.
Which is kind of a shocking number. Again, it's hard to wrap your head around it, but every broadcaster in the world making news programs, making soap operas, spend on commercial content, all of that stuff. 8 companies spend more than half of the money for the entire globe. So that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's the shape of our industry. So when we think about what the trends are in the industry, changes, who's being affected, where work is done, what's going on with those, let's say 8 to 10 companies has this ripple effect that goes all around the world.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, let's talk about 2025 and beyond then, sort of mentioning that. How do you see things panning out for the rest of the year? Is content going to be consumed the same? You hear about certain places now that are kind of like, I know it's been done before, but these guys maybe feel a bit different, sort of like the flashier TikTok type things where they're sort of releasing 2-minute, 3-minute features or episodic work at the moment, and people are consuming. How do you see things panning out?
It's a very fast-changing marketplace, and as you know, people's attention is split between all of these short form, long form, YouTube, Netflix, traditional broadcasters. So everyone's competing for attention. Personally, I focus on the fact for visual effects that we tend to work on a particular type of content, as you know, that's the sort of prestige Hollywood content. The glossier stuff, the bigger budget stuff tends to be leaning into the visual effects work that the industry today is doing. So you could say, TikTok influencers are going to grab a huge amount of eyeballs, and they're not hiring visual effects studios, and I'm sure that's true. At the same time, I really believe there's always going to be a place for that sort of top tier spectacle that is going to bring people into the theater. They want to see it on the big screen. May not be as many as it was previously of films of that kind, but there weren't that many to begin with, in my opinion. So, I'm not worried that 5 years from now, no one will turn out to the cinema to see Avatar. Spectacle on that scale. And part of what makes it a spectacle and part of what attracts people is the sort of top tier nature of it.
Yeah.
So whatever the state of the art is and whatever only Hollywood can achieve, I think people will always be interested in that. I'm not too worried about the so-called death of Hollywood. There may be less people watching the content. There may be new people watching the content.
Yeah.
Maybe more people in a different part of the world. But I think our interest as human beings in stories that aren't just 3 minutes long, that keep us engaged, that take us on an emotional journey, that maybe impress us with a big spectacle. I think that's always going to be there.
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, you mentioned Avatar then, fantastic, amazing, new technologies, emerging technologies within that film on the second release. I mean, how do you see technology shaping what we're doing moving forward?
I think to go straight to the elephant in the room, which is AI.
Yeah.
We're going to see that used more and more. But one thing I always go back to is there's more than one type of AI. And a lot of the chatter you see online and a lot of the more sensational headlines sort of confuse different types of AI.
Yeah.
So we're all very captivated by Gen AI. You type in a sentence and it generates an image or a video. It's very impressive technology.
Yeah.
That technology today has limited uses in the type of filmmaking we've been doing up until now, at least. So it's very, very useful for sketching out ideas and iterating quickly on certain things. But the final pixels you see on the cinema screen are minutely crafted. Clients want complete control over that final image.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work on the back end is designed around being able to give them that, not just making the work look fantastic, but making it look controllable. So I think in the next couple of years, what we're going to see is more and more use of, I think machine learning is a good term for it. Now, machine learning, of course, is a type of AI or a pseudonym for AI, but just in terms of sort of backing away a little bit from more sensational feelings that the term AI brings up these days, machine learning technology, incredibly useful within VFX pipelines. It's going to help us increase quality. It's going to make things that weren't really practical or possible before possible. It will increase efficiency in some areas. But it's going to be these incremental steps in the existing pipeline, at least for the next couple of years, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, I mean, again, to keep things positive, obviously won't say where I was, but I had a meeting this week, and the reality is a lot of AI companies that are looking to sort of break into visual effects. Let's face it, some of the stuff that they're doing is pretty impressive.
Oh yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
However, there's an element of scraping that is used with these tools, and that's really important to note because a lot of the meetings I've been going on recently, those people aren't interested in touching something that utilizes scraping. Which I'd like to think for the individual and the artistry is a fantastic, and it means that the machine learning, actually using it in a more positive manner, efficient manner, is actually amazing. Look, are people going to change their mind on those AI tool sets when they're more refined? Maybe. But until they find out a way to allocate the royalties to that scraped data, the lawsuits will fly.
There's legal issues and there's also technical limitations, and a lot of the sort of conversation out there in public about this doesn't take that stuff into account. I've heard secondhand that some of the major studios here in Hollywood have outright told VFX vendors no AI on our productions. They don't want the legal exposure, I assume, of years down the line, some lawsuit which says AI technology was used in this blockbuster movie that made all this money, and now there's a lawsuit. So, some studios, I think, are being pretty strict about it. There's a sort of flip side to that, which is that with these different types of AI, I think it's making VFX studios gun shy about talking about the machine learning techniques they're using, because that is also another type of AI. Again, I think it benefits us to sort of take a little bit of a nuanced approach here and say AI is not just one thing.
Yes.
There's very useful, machine learning AI tools that you can train with narrow data sets that completely avoid all of the issues we have with, say, large language models and scraping data. We could train a model purely on content that we own, that's in-house, or perhaps even the footage from one movie that we're working on. And again, there's no legal issues with that. But it's this sort of confusion of lumping it all into one thing that I think is actually going to hold back AI a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. And on the contractual sort of red tape at the moment, I mean, anyone that is using it has to, give the, the fact that it's almost like being financially checked. You've got to prove where those funds have come from. You've got to prove where that that imagery's come from as well. So I do see that as a positive, especially for now, regarding the creatives and artists that are constantly thinking, "What's happening? I'm out of a job forever," kind of thing, because they need to be put at ease. As you said, flip side, totally agree with the machine learning. Something that's kind of been around for a little bit anyway. Just with the power of AI, how much more can it come along? Can it actually help a creative become even more creative? I don't know. I'm always going to look at things on a positive spin.
And I think the answer is yes, and I think it will make us more efficient. But one thing we've seen time and again in visual effects is we're always upping the ante. Right, the expectations of quality and sophistication in the imagery keep increasing. We can do things now that we, really would have had a hard time doing 10 years ago. So it's not quite as cut and dry that, I think the sort of public perception is that the only use for AI is to reduce labor. It's not true. There are many uses of AI that to do with, quality and complexity and speed that will keep us plenty busy. So it's not that cut and dried. I mean, one way I think about it was the being replaced by AI line. I mean, this is a kind of a silly analogy, but come with me. How many professional drivers have been replaced by self-driving cars to date? Not saying it'll never happen. Not saying the technology is no good. It's very good. But the actual adoption of it and the point where we can actually really use it in real life is taking a bit longer than people thought. Right. So I'm not quite ready to put my kids on a school bus that doesn't have a human driver and wave them off to school. And the school district isn't quite ready to insure that school bus. So there's these hurdles that are just, non-trivial.
So it's a really good point. Never thought of it like that. I haven't been in one of the self-driving cars yet. Blows my mind. Obviously there's cars that you can be in the driver's seat and you can sort of set it to auto drive. Look, don't get me wrong. There's people that I'm actually grateful for that tool. But it's a very, very good point.
And don't get me wrong. There's a science fiction future for us where most or all cars are self-driving, and we will get there at some point, or at least have the technology that can do it and have it be widely available. But if we sent all of the professional drivers home today, no groceries would get delivered, no kids would get bused to school. It's a little bit early to have that conversation. I sort of feel like it's the same in visual effects. If we tell artists that AI is going to do it all and they don't need to come into work, we're not going to have any movies.
Very true. We're not quite at the sort of Fifth Element level yet of floating cars and
And
whatnot.
it's a legit question how long it's going to take us to get there. And, the technology, the people who are most excited about it, maybe a bit boosterish, are always going to say next year. By next year, it'll be a different world and all of the institutions will have changed. Companies will work differently. Audiences will be consuming different stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's often overstating the case.
For sure.
5 years, 10 years from now, I think we can have more meaningful conversations about how things are going to be reshaped.
And, look, the reality is as well, with new tech, whether it's AI, whatever it is, it requires money.
Yes.
And I actually, again, outside looking in, I don't think, the current state of play with the facilities vendors that we have now have the budget to really make a dent right now. Vendors need work. So then that margin is going on keeping the lights on, not R&D.
Yeah.
Obviously the bigger guys have a little bit more cash, but it's still not the forefront of their business.
Yeah.
Which again then leads into another talking point, outside investment. Visual effects becoming more corporate. One hand I can understand it, the other takes away a bit of that romance and nostalgia and what it's about. What's your thought on sort of this outside money coming in?
I think it all comes down to good communication, pretty much everything in life, right? So part of the consulting work I do is helping people with mergers and acquisitions and trying to identify companies that they might want to invest in. And one of the things I really try to bring to that is just making sure we're all on the same page, we're all clear what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When investors first come to the visual effects industry, and to be clear, there's some very savvy investors out there who have been in the industry a long time who really do understand it and care about it.
Yeah.
But when investors who aren't familiar with the industry come for the first time, many of them think we're a technology business.
Yes.
They picture us as we're writing software and computers make movies and things like this. Now, those of us in the industry know full well we're a service business. We have people who supply a very complicated service for some very special clients. And that's a different world and a way different business model to writing a piece of software and selling 1 million copies of it. So that's the first bit of, let's say, education that needs to happen when people who don't know the space come into it with money.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the challenges that we've had with outside investment in the industry come from not lining up the expectations.
Yeah.
If you have an investor who comes in with unrealistic expectations and you allow them to maintain those expectations until it's too late, until the money is in there and now we've got to hit targets and meet numbers and things like that, generally that's not going to end well for the majority of people.
Yeah. And that works both ways with the managing of expectations, I feel. Not just this industry, every industry.
Yeah.
People, investors tend to be quite bullish. The people receiving the investment seem to be quite reserved and scared of upsetting the investor. And what I mean by that is, not managing the expectations properly and doing the right cost analysis.
Yeah.
And working from, doing your risk analysis from starting at the worst case scenario. I think a lot of people get too bogged down with fiction. And if we write these numbers down, that's going to look really good.
Yeah.
And they were never achievable in the first place.
Right.
And then that's when you've got an annoyed investor as well. So I do think that it goes both ways.
Absolutely.
And requires the person who's receiving the investment to put their business hat on, or if they're not comfortable in that area, find someone that can help and break it down. That's the art of negotiation, right? When someone's offering you something, they're normally here, knowing they can go up to here, right?
Yeah.
That is the general kind of feel I get anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the reality is meet in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just jump at the first number that gets thrown at you because it sounds juicy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you've actually done that breakdown, does it actually result in efficient, profitable, ethical business practice?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do that, then why not have
Mm-hmm.
people coming in and supporting? Because done correctly,
Mm-hmm.
you know, does that mean that pay goes up a bit?
Mm-hmm. I think the winning ticket was this, and you know, many things in visual effects. Like you said, it's the, you know, the communication, it's the setting of expectations. A word I think about a lot is partnership.
Yeah.
You know, I spent, you know, the first half of my career in visual effects production, even after that, working with clients as an executive producer. And my observation about the shows that go well and the shows that can be profitable for your facility is that there's a genuine feeling of partnership between you and the client.
Yeah.
Some clients, let's face it, they're just not interested in that. They're not in that headspace, or they're in a situation that doesn't permit them to do more than just toss work your way and receive it back. It's very transactional.
Yeah.
But I've had wonderful experiences, you know, some of my favorite shows with clients who really viewed the visual effects team as a partner and realized they could get more out of us, more creativity, more bang for the buck, and just a more comfortable experience if they viewed us as partners rather than people on the other side of a wall.
100%.
I think that, you know, that same philosophy applies in many places in life, but also in investment.
Absolutely. I mean, I can speak firsthand for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny, I'm a service business, you're a service business, but sometimes people sort of look at me as that outsider, third party, the same way that they don't want to be seen as that by their peers who are handing them work. You know, the collaboration is key. The people that work with me all in, our collaboration's flawless, you know, and things get done. I am sure that there's vendor studio relationships out there that have got that all-in mentality as well, and that's why they get amazing things done and can be profitable. You're completely right. When you just kind of sat on the outside, it's hard to deliver a service because you don't have the full picture.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I can completely relate to that.
Service is an interesting sort of idea or concept, and I think one misunderstanding about it is that it sort of implies that it's, you know, it's menial, giving someone service. Giving someone a service is a very elevating thing. It elevates them and it elevates you. I have a lot of pride in that. You know,
100%.
some of the most successful projects I've been on, some of the facilities I've worked at, really took pride in providing that aspect of it to the client.
Yep.
And actually that can be a differentiator for a facility. I mean, it's maybe a fancy label for something we all know deep down. But if clients come to you with problems and you can help them solve those problems, if they feel like they're comfortable with you, that you're giving them good service, they're more likely to come back. They sleep better at night knowing that you're on their team. They tend to be loyal. And you can build a healthy and profitable business
100%.
by giving them that value.
100%. And again, it just comes down to just a little bit more due diligence, essentially, and willingness. So, I mean, look, something I quite like over here, to be honest, in the States is people are very willing to have conversations. Doesn't mean it'll work out, but the key thing there is the willingness to have the conversations, which I quite like, because information's key to making things happen, right? So it's very, very interesting, and you know, all of those practices then trickle down, you know, and benefit everyone, which is quite important.
In all honesty, that's one of the reasons I moved out here, and I was so clear that LA and Hollywood was the place I wanted to come and participate in this type of filmmaking. Don't take this too literally, but my impression back in the UK was that if you had big ideas, if you want to make a movie, people very skeptical. They were always looking for reasons that it wouldn't work and reasons to say no. Whereas out here in LA, for better or worse, I think people tend to look for reasons to do it and tend to look for reasons that it will work.
Yep.
So, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but this difference in mindset, I think, is a real thing.
Definitely.
Here in California, there's lots of big projects get off the ground, but, Silicon Valley as well as Hollywood and many other things. And I think that attitude of, can this work? It's big and ambitious, but I think we can do it. That's here.
I see it. I feel it. Experienced it. Living it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I get it all. I think, look at that risk analysis and,
mm-hmm.
If the risk analysis comes back saying I'm going to be okay,
mm-hmm.
why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not explore something different? Why not take that meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Why not have that call?
Mm-hmm.
Because you never know what it's going to lead to.
Mm-hmm.
And just seems like people here are a little bit more willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's very Hollywood as well. I mean, if you've been in the industry a little while, you come across the same people over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm sure that one day I will end up reporting to someone who once reported to me.
Yeah.
That is almost inevitably going to happen. Or someone who is, a coordinator once when I was a producer or EP will become a client. And so it sort of trains you to look at people as people, not necessarily for the role you're in right now, but just knowing that we're sort of in this tight-knit industry together.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, someone who's been in Hollywood for a long time now, it's changed for sure. I mean, how does it feel? It's obviously living through those changes, being part of those changes, is Hollywood... I mean, I always feel like Hollywood will, whether the work gets done here, I feel like the deals are always going to get done here. I feel like it definitely has a reason to exist.
Yeah.
Is that something you see and feel? Can Hollywood ever come back to Hollywood? I mean, where do you see Hollywood in 10 years?
Oh, there's a host of interesting questions there.
Yeah, I just bombarded you, sorry.
No, it's all good. We'll take them one at a time. I mean, I think that the deals are very likely to keep happening here for the reason we touched on before, which is that the vast majority of spending on high-end visual effects of the type we currently produce in the industry, that money and those decisions come from this small number of companies that are all heavily centered in Los Angeles. So you sort of got in a little bit of Hollywood history, right? If we go back to 1948, when you and I were young men, Kurt.
I was just born, actually.
Yeah, the Hollywood studios at the time, as you know, were monopolies. And there was a famous sort of antitrust case in the US where they had to break up their monopolies. So the studios of the time, they owned cinemas, theater chains, exhibition. They distributed the films to those theater chains, and they also produced the movie. So it was a vertically integrated monopoly. So Justice Department forced them to break up and said, okay, you got to get rid of one of those three pieces. Which one is it? So it turned out the distribution, the bit in the middle, in some ways was the most lucrative part of that. That was the bit that I think was never on the table for the studios to give up. The studios are distributors. That's really the heart of the business. So is it going to be the theater chains, the cinemas that we give up, or is it going to be the production?
Yeah.
And the theory is that the only way they could guarantee themselves the product they needed to distribute was to keep a tight grip on production. So they divested themselves of the cinemas, and that's true to this day. So I don't think the big movie studios here really want to be in production. Perhaps that's a bad way of saying it. The production aspect of it is not really the core of their business, which, naively you might think. They make movies, right? Well, they distribute movies, and in order to have movies to distribute, they're heavily involved in production.
Yeah.
But all things being equal, I think, if they had another source of massive blockbuster global appeal movies that they didn't have to finance the production of, they could just buy them when they were done and, watch them and see if they wanted to buy them.
Yeah.
I think that would be quite an attractive model for these big distributors. They're in production because they sort of have to be.
Interesting.
So when you talk about owning IP and doing the production work, owning the means of production, those are two different types of business, and they don't necessarily always stick together. So part of what we've seen was this sort of globalization of visual effects moving around the world, is that the production activity, which is vital, but at the same time, it's not the core business of these distributors, is something that they've been able to send to different locations. That doesn't have to happen, it seems, on the studio backlot here in Los Angeles. Other types of activities, do need to stay close to clients. And actually, to speak of the Visual Effects Atlas, one of the things we see when we look at the distribution of skill sets around the world, nothing that will surprise you, but it's nice to see it on the page. Pre-vis and post-vis artists are heavily concentrated in cities where the clients are working and making movies. No big surprise there, right? But if you look at the map, it's like there's a bunch of pre-vis and post-vis artists in LA. There's quite a few in London. There's not so many of that type of artist in other major VFX hubs where different types of work happen. So you sort of see proximity to the client really determines the types of roles and where they stay and where they need to go.
Really interesting way to look at that.
Now, to touch on one more thing, you sort of said, what does it look like 10 years from now in Hollywood? So a lot of us are thinking about and talking about solutions for the industry. Like the industry is a problem to be solved. I'm being cheeky when I say that. But, it really, I think it comes down to what we want to achieve, for the industry and in the industry. One thing I notice about the film industry in other countries, we talked about, I grew up in England, grew up in Britain. So Britain has a national cinema. They have government institutions and special sources of funding to get British cinema up on the screen. And part of the thought about that is that Britain has a cultural identity, a national identity they want to express it through cinema. And Hollywood isn't necessarily going to do that for us. That's not the business that Hollywood is in. Fair enough. If we want that done, then, in the UK, we have to get our national cinema out there. So I think that's a little bit of an analogy there to the tax rebates and other strategies we see used around the world. I think here in Los Angeles, if it's our goal to have a healthy, thriving visual effects industry of a certain size here in LA, maybe that's the way to look at it. And those are the types of problems we need to solve. It's not that LA, needs to compete globally on, being the cheapest place to do this work or having the most people or whatever it is. I think here in the US and, in LA and Hollywood, we're prone to seeing ourselves in a sort of, forgive me, dominant position in the global film industry. And as a result, we don't tend to look for solutions that are sort of more local and more limited in scope. So I think, when we're looking at solutions, when we're talking about implementing rebates in LA or other types of strategies we might use to keep the work here, the goal is not to stop working internationally. The goal is not to be the cheapest place or the biggest place. It's to have a healthy ecosystem here in LA that meets our goals, that suits what we want to have.
Do you think that can be achieved?
Yeah. Yeah, if that's what we set our minds to. Again, I think it's all about asking the right questions. If the question is, how can LA compete globally with major VFX hubs and bring massive amounts of VFX work back here? I mean, that's, there's ways to do that too, but they're not necessarily healthy for the industry and they're not necessarily sustainable.
I hear that. I mean, you're talking about the tax incentives, the sort of production and new studios popping up. I think New Jersey are getting a hub. I actually read that Vegas might be coming one as well.
Investment out there.
Yeah. So I think look, VFX is and film is global. So it should provide jobs for everyone everywhere. It's just, how do we make sure that people that have created a life in a place don't, take a hit because of those things? How do we grow it globally so that people, because it's interesting, right? Let's take the UK, for example. I'm from the north, small town. There's no visual effects there. Right, so you have to move to London, and I guess the point I'm making is, keep growing outwards, of course, but try and keep everybody in tune and earning at the same time. But there's got to be a way. There has to be a way. So I guess we don't have the answers for that. We'll keep our ears open and see what happens and keep discussing. And look, before we wrap up, I really enjoy this question. Probably one of my favorite ones because it's unique and individual to everyone that comes on. And yeah, didn't prep you, so you're on the spot, mate.
All right.
Give me one peak of your VFX career so far.
The thing that comes to mind is the first time I, as an EP, got to promote a coordinator into a producer role. I'm really invested in seeing other people advance in their careers, in creating an environment where they're supported in doing that, where they're properly trained, where they get to move forward at the right pace for them. And it was very fulfilling for me. At COSA, I was managing their production team for 7 years, and that's a long enough time to see people come in and develop and evolve and see them, again, blossom with mentorship and, be given new challenges. So I think a real highlight for me was helping somebody else take that step when they were ready, knowing that they trained and, ready to go. That was a real career highlight for me. And there's been obviously other situations like that where I've been able to help someone move forward in their career or whatever it is. I just take tremendous satisfaction in that.
Love to hear that. I think that's a really good message as well. For this industry to continue to grow and develop, all of those things that we have just discussed are valid. On the flip side, it's the people. And as a peer, as a mentor, in whatever field you're in visual effects or in any walk of life, really, your mindset has to be to make the individual that you're training, you're mentoring, become a better version of you, whilst utilizing their own thought processes and skill sets, because that's where I see things grow.
Absolutely.
Lovely note to end on, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat.
Thanks, Kurt. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome, mate.